Hi, and welcome back to Accessible Torah. This week, Parashot Vayakhel Pikudei, which bring us to the conclusion of the Book of Shemot, Exodus. Yes, this Shabbat we read two portions. Vayakhel and Pikudei are usually read together in a regular Jewish year. In a leap year, they are read separately. In these two parashot, the construction of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, is completed, and with it, the Book of Shemot, meaning names, or in English known as Exodus, the second book of the Torah, which is also often called Sefer HaGeulah, the Book of Redemption, because it describes the unfolding process of redemption, beginning with the birth of Moshe in Egypt, continuing through the exodus of Bnei Israel from Egypt from slavery to physical freedom, and concluding with a complete transformation. Bnei Israel are no longer Shemot, names. The people of Israel transform from individuals into a gathered community, a nation that together built the Mishkan, and in which and amongst whom Hashem dwells. And when reading these portions, generally speaking, there is a sense of repetition. Sometimes it's as if we're looking inward and outward at the same time, seeing the same ideas arranged differently, or perhaps there are different ideas arranged similarly. Let's begin and find out. First, Parashat Vayakhel. The Parsha opens with another commandment of Shabbat, then describes the donations to the Mishkan, the appointment of Bezalel and his assistant Oholiab as the master craftsmen, and finally the construction of the Mishkan and its vessels. At first glance, these seem to be subjects we have already encountered in previous parashot, and specifically, the description of the vessels and the curtains of the Mishkan appear again almost word for word, just as they were originally commanded in the previous parashot. So, why the repetition? Plainly, since the first time these verses appear, they are being commanded, and in this parasha, the exact same psukim are being executed. The Ramban explains that the Torah repeats these details in order to emphasize that the people of Israel carried out the work exactly as they were commanded. And this is also the reason that the phrase Ka'asher tziva Hashem et Moshe, as Hashem commanded Moshe, appears again and again. In other words, the Mishkan was built precisely according to the divine instruction. Yet something more intricate appears in the structure. The description of the Mishkan vessels in the earlier portions of Teruma and Tetzaveh appear again in Vayakhel Pikudei almost word for word, except arranged in reverse order, forming a chiasmus, a mirror structure. In Teruma and Tetzaveh, the commandments proceed from inward, Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies, and outward from thereon, beginning with the holiest element, the ark, containing the Luchot HaBrit, the tablets, then the table, the menorah, and only nearing conclusion, the structure of the Mishkan itself. But in Vayakhel Pikudei, when the Mishkan is actually built, the order is nearly reversed, and here the construction begins with the structure of the Mishkan, and only afterwards the vessels are made. Rashi and the Talmud explain this difference. Bezalel says to Moshe, Moshe Rabbeinu, minhago shel olam, Adam boneh bait. Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher, the way of the world is that a person first builds a house, ve'achar kach machnis letocho kelim, and only afterward brings the vessels into it. In other words, first you build the home, then you move in the furniture. Meaning the order of execution of the master project of the Mishkan was orchestrated by Bezalel's divine execution orders, which were not only divine but also logical and sensible. To understand the flow of the parashot and the themes that repeat, let's recap where we left off. In the previous parasha, Kitisa, we conclude with Moshe descending Har Sinai after receiving the second tablets, the renewal of the covenant, which to this day marks Yom Kippur, known in English as the Day of Atonement. And this is what becomes the central axis around which the mirror structure appears. Events that occurred before the second tablet, the Chet HaEgel, appear again after the second tablets, but in reverse order. Through this reversal, completion is created, Geula. The parasha begins with the gathering of the people. Vayakhel Moshe et kol adat bnei Israel. Moshe assembled the entire assembly of the children of Israel. In the previous parasha, just before the sin of the golden calf, we read, Vayikahel ha'am al Aharon. The people gathered upon Aharon. Vayikahel, kahal, the same root appears in both verses. Kahal, a gathering, but the purpose is entirely different. One gathering leads to sin, and the other gathering leads to holiness and the building of the Mishkan. The same word reflected in very different directions. The first commandment given in Vayakhel, Sheshet yamim ta'aseh melacha, uvayom hashvi'i yeh lechem kodesh. 6 days work shall be done, but the seventh day shall be holy for you. Shabbat is also duplicated and mirrored again, as it was in the previous parasha, wedged in between the commandments of the Mishkan and the sin of the golden calf. And gold also appears in both narratives. Gold was used to create the golden calf, an act of idolatry, avodah zarah. Yet gold is used later to build the vessels of the Mishkan, the menorah, the mizbeach, the altar. The material remains the same, but the intention transforms it completely. The Mishkan becomes a vehicle for uplifting, for the rectification of the sin of the golden calf, and what preceded it. And although the structure itself of the Mishkan is temporary, the divine presence within those who build it remains. At the beginning of the Book of Shemot, Hashem acts directly and powerfully through miracles to redeem Bnei Israel from Egypt. But by the end of the book, Bnei Israel, the humans, are those who are contributing, building, and creating a dwelling place for Hashem. The contributions elevate us, again, a reversal. And it's only once we gather for holiness that we become sanctified as a community, as a people. And looking outward, the end of Shemot mirrors the beginning of Beresheet. At the very beginning of the Torah, in Beresheet, Genesis, Hashem creates the world for human beings. And at the end of Shemot, Exodus, human beings create a dwelling place for Hashem within the world. Beresheet begins with individuals. Shemot concludes with the formation of a nation. Beresheet describes the creation of the world, and Shemot concludes with the creation of the Mishkan. The Mishkan is described almost like a miniature creation. The Torah uses similar language to describe both the completion of the creation of the world and the completion of the Mishkan. Vayichulu hashamayim v'haaretz, and Vayichal Elokim bayom hashvi'i. And at the end of the completion of the building of the Mishkan, Vayichal Moshe et hamelacha. And in creation, Vayar Elokim kitov. And in Pikudei, Vayar Moshe et kol hamelacha. And upon conclusion of the creation in Beresheet, Vayevarech Elokim. And after the completion of the Mishkan, Vayevarech otam Moshe. Just as Hashem blesses the creation, Moshe blesses the people upon completing the Mishkan. And Jewish thought teaches about a deep connection between the creation of the world, the structure of the Mishkan, and the human being. Each reflects the other as a kind of microcosm, a small version of a larger whole. Humans are sometimes called a small world, Bria Ktana, or a small creation, because every element that exists in the universe exists in some form within the human body or soul, and all of the vessels of the Mishkan are parallel to human organs in the body. Now back to mirrors, aside from the literary structures. Vayas et hakior nechoshet ve'et kano nechoshet b'marot hatzovot. The basin of copper and its base of copper from the mirrors of the women who gathered at the entrance of the tent of the meeting, Ohel Moed. In these ancient times, more than 3,000 years ago, mirrors were made from highly polished copper. The women who donated these mirrors are mentioned explicitly in this portion. They were among the first to contribute to the Mishkan, and notably, women did not participate in the sin of the golden calf or contribute to it. This week, some countries celebrated International Women's Day, not a Jewish holiday per se, but let's observe the additional special mention of women in this parasha. V'chol isha chachmat lev beyadea tavu. Women were the ones specifically chosen to weave the tapestries of the Mishkan, and the personal trait or quality required to do so, chochmat lev, wisdom of the heart. And yes, right here in the Torah, given to us more than 3,000 years ago, women are described as an active, participating, integral force in the building of the Mishkan. And toward the end of Vayakhel, the donations became more than enough. והמלאכה הייתה דיים, לכל המלאכה לעשות אותה, והותר. The work was sufficient for all that needed to be done, and there was extra. Moshe then instructed the people to stop bringing contributions, and Parashat Pikudei begins with an accounting. Ele Pikudei HaMishkan. These are the reckonings of the Mishkan, Mishkan HaEdut, the Mishkan of testimony. Moshe records the exact quantities of gold, silver, and copper, and all of the materials donated to the Mishkan, with accuracy and transparency for all the people. The counting and the recording is done by a third party. Avodat HaLeviim beyad Itamar ben Aharon HaKohen. Moshe initiates the work for the Levites to execute and for Itamar, the son of Aharon, to oversee. In reporting terms, this is revolutionary. And to conclude, let's look at a geometric shape that we are all familiar with, that can help us understand and reflect upon the concepts we learned in this parasha, which reflects the structure of the Mishkan, the creation, and perhaps us, ourselves, the Jewish people. A shape that can do all that? Yes, the Magen David. In Genesis, upon creation, Hashem creates the universe for us, humans. Holiness is directed from the upper world downward to our physical world, culminating in the creation of the human. In this parasha, Bnei Israel build the Mishkan, and by doing so, through that act of holiness, they elevate themselves upward. And once the building of the Mishkan is complete, it describes Hashem dwelling within it. Again, holiness being bestowed from up to down. And the Magen David, the Jewish star, also represents the 6 days of creation, with the center, the hexagon, representing Shabbat. The surface area of the hexagon in the center is equal to that of the 6 stars on the circumference, representing that Shabbat holds blessing and abundance, both physically and spiritually, for all 6 remaining days of the week. The first thing sanctified in the world at the very beginning of Beresheet was time, Shabbat. And now in Vayakhel Pikudei at the end of Shemot, we sanctify space, a dwelling place for Hashem in the physical world. The essence of Judaism is transforming the mundane into sacred by taking real action in the real world and living according to Torah, and by doing so, bringing divine holiness down to earth. And the very final pasuk in the book of Exodus, Ki anan Hashem al hamishkan yomam, ve'esh tihye laila bo, le'enei kol bnei Israel b'chol masa'ehem. The cloud protected the tabernacle by day, and the fire would be on it at night, for all of Bnei Israel to see throughout their journeys. And at the conclusion of a book of Torah, we proclaim, Chazak, Chazak, v'nitchazek. Strong, strong, may we grow stronger. Even the smallest human act can elevate the world. Through our actions, we ourselves become a dwelling place for the divine. And what at first appeared to be a repetition or a reflection in some way may actually reveal a balance, harmony, a completion, geula, redemption. May the merit of our learning together, the small modern sanctuary of online study, bring protection day and night to all of the homes in Israel. Next week, we begin the third book of Torah, Vayikra. And until then, Shabbat Shalom u'mevorach.